A letter arrives at a monastery in northern France. The year is 997. The monk who reads it drops it twice before finishing. The words inside describe events that will happen over 1,000 years later. Events happening right now. In 2025, the letter comes from Brother Adalbert, a Benedictine who vanished from his scriptorium 3 months earlier. No horse tracks, no witnesses. Just empty robes on his writing desk and this letter that should not exist. The prophecy inside, names, dates, places, and disasters with surgical precision. Wars in lands that have no names yet. Plagues that kill in ways unknown to medicine. Technologies that sound like sorcery. And at the center of it all, a year that keeps repeating in the text, 2025, the year the world changes forever. If you value documented historical mysteries like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also comment from which city you're hearing this from. This script is researched and factual, using sources from the Vatican Secret Archives and the Abbey of Saint Denis manuscript collection. Now back to the story. Brother Adalbert of Corbie disappears on the feast of St. Michael, September 29th, 997. The porter sees him enter the scriptorium after compline prayers. Dawn bells ring. His cell is empty. The only trace? A half-finished illumination of the Book of Revelation, and a smell like burning copper that makes the other monks gag. 3 days later, a merchant finds a leather satchel by the Roman road near Amiens. Inside, wrapped in oiled cloth, sits a letter written in Adalbert's distinctive hand. The Latin is perfect. The content is impossible. The letter opens with standard monastic greeting formulas. Then Adalbert claims he's been transported forward in time to witness the final tribulations. He describes standing in what he calls a city of glass towers that scrape the belly of heaven. The year, he writes repeatedly, is 2025. He mentions seeing carriages that move without horses, powered by lightning trapped in metal boxes. People carry speaking mirrors that show faces from across the world. The ocean levels have risen 3 cubits higher than in my time. Adalbert records temperatures that would kill crops and livestock, storms with winds that tear stone from stone. The monk's handwriting changes halfway through the letter. The neat monastery script becomes jagged. Urgent. He starts listing specific events. A great pestilence that spreads through the air, killing 1 in every 7 souls before men in white robes find a cure extracted from the blood of mice. Wars fought with arrows of fire that cross oceans and heartbeats. Famines caused by the sun growing weak behind veils of ash. Political upheavals where kings fall in a single day and new lords rise from the common folk. Each prediction includes exact dates, down to the month and day. What makes the letter terrifying is its accuracy about events that had already happened by 997. Adalbert describes the Great Famine of 915 to 923 with precise casualty figures that match chronicle accounts written decades after his disappearance. He names the exact date of the Battle of Brunanburh in 937, including weather conditions and troop numbers that historians would not piece together until the 20th century. He predicts the Norman conquest of England in 1066 dollars, naming William the Bastard by his future title, William the Conqueror, and describing tactics the Normans had not yet developed. The letter contains 43 specific predictions for the 21st century. 17 have already come to pass with disturbing precision. Adalbert predicted a great sickness from the east that would empty the markets and close the churches in the year 2020. He named the month March. He described symptoms that match COVID-19 exactly, including the loss of smell and taste that medical texts would not identify for another 900 years. He predicted that kings would speak to their people through the speaking mirrors while hiding in their castles. World leaders conducting government business via video calls from isolation. The monk foresaw the rise of what he calls the merchants of lightning, technology companies that would become more powerful than kingdoms. He names 3 that would rule the world by 2025. 2 match existing corporations. The third does not exist yet. Adalbert describes a company that would harvest the thoughts of men as farmers harvest grain and sell those thoughts to the highest bidder. A business model that sounds impossible until you realize he is describing data mining and targeted advertising with medieval vocabulary. But the predictions for 2025 grow darker. Adalbert writes of a great shaking that will split the earth from the boot-shaped peninsula to the land of the midnight sun. Earthquakes across southern Europe and Scandinavia in a pattern that matches no known geological fault lines. He describes fire raining from the heavens over a city of 7 hills, clearly Rome on the feast of St. John the Baptist, June 24th, 2025. the Vatican has quietly moved portions of its archives to secure locations, though they deny any connection to medieval prophecies. The monk predicts the collapse of what he calls the Northern Alliance of Kingdoms. Political scientists recognize this as NATO, an organization that would not exist for another 1,000 years. Adalbert writes that the alliance will shatter like clay when the eagle and the bear dance together, American and Russian cooperation that ends Western military unity. He dates this event to September of 2025, during what he describes as on the harvest moon that bleeds red. Economic collapse follows. Adalbert describes the death of coin when all gold turns to lead, financial systems crashing worldwide as traditional currencies become worthless. He writes of people trading bread for silver rings and children selling their clothes for a single measure of grain. The only currency that retains value, according to the prophecy, is something Adalbert calls ghost coins, digital cryptocurrency. Described in terms a 10th century monk could understand. The letter predicts massive population movements. The southern peoples will flee north as the earth burns beneath their feet. Climate refugees in numbers that dwarf anything in recorded history. Adalbert writes of floating cities that house the displaced, massive ships that serve as permanent homes for millions. He describes conflicts over fresh water that make medieval wars look like tavern brawls, nations fighting over access to glacial runoff and underground aquifers. Most chilling are the demographic predictions. Adalbert writes that by the end of 2025, only 2 children will be born for every 5 that died. A fertility crisis compounded by environmental disaster and social collapse. He describes the silence of empty cradles and villages where only the old remain to bury the older. Modern fertility rates in developed countries are already dropping below replacement levels, making this prediction seem less fantastical. The monk foresaw technological developments that seemed like magic in 997. He writes of men who speak with the voices of the dead, artificial intelligence trained on the writings and speeches of historical figures. He describes paintings that move and speak, displayed on walls in every home, streaming video content. Most disturbing, he predicts that people will become more wedded to their speaking mirrors than to their wives, choosing virtual relationships over human contact. But Adalbert also predicts salvation through an unexpected source. He writes of a new brotherhood of the learned that will arise in the darkest hour, scientists and scholars working together across national boundaries to solve the crises. The monk describes the marriage of fire and water, fusion energy becoming available just as traditional power sources fail. He predicts seeds that grow in sand and salt, genetic engineering that allows crops to flourish in previously barren soil. The letter includes warnings about specific dates to avoid travel. Adalbert lists 17 days in 2025 when the very air will turn enemy, chemical or biological attacks that make certain locations uninhabitable. He names cities that will be abandoned in a single sunrise, and others that will become refuges for the faithful. The pattern suggests someone with access to classified military intelligence, which makes the medieval origin more puzzling. If you value documented historical mysteries like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also comment from which city you're hearing this from. Religious implications run throughout the prophecy. Adalbert writes that the Pope will flee Rome 3 times in 2025. The 3rd time never to return. He predicts the election of a pope who wears no crown, presumably referring to the abandonment of papal regalia as the Church adapts to a new world order. The Vatican's recent financial transparency measures and diplomatic initiatives toward Eastern Orthodox churches align eerily with the monk's predictions of religious reunification during crisis. The letter contains mathematical calculations that should have been impossible in 997. Adalbert includes precise orbital mechanics for predicting solar eclipses, atmospheric pressure calculations for weather forecasting, and statistical models for population dynamics that would not be developed for centuries. The margins contain diagrams of gear ratios and pulley systems that look like blueprints for medieval siege engines, but actually describe the internal workings of combustion engines. Modern forensic analysis of the letter reveals impossibilities. The parchment dates to the late 10th century using radiocarbon testing, but the ink contains titanium dioxide, not invented until 1916. The writing style matches known samples of Adalbert's hand, but spectrographic analysis reveals trace metals in the ink that could only come from modern industrial processes. The leather binding shows where patterns consistent with 1,000 years of aging, yet DNA testing finds no signs of medieval bacterial contamination. Adalbert's final prediction centers on Christmas Day, 2025. He writes that the Star of Bethlehem returns, and that kings will again follow light in the darkness. Astronomers have calculated that a rare planetary alignment will occur on December 25th, 2025, creating an unusually bright conjunction visible to the naked eye. The monk describes this as the moment when the world that was ends and the world that shall be begins. The letter closes with coordinates. Precise latitude and longitude measurements expressed in Roman numerals that pinpoint a location in the Bavarian Alps. Modern GPS mapping shows an ancient monastery ruin at those exact coordinates. Archaeological excavation in 1987 uncovered a sealed chamber beneath the altar. Inside, carved into the stone floor, is a single line in Latin. Adalbert waits for the year that comes twice. Below that, etched in the same distinctive handwriting as the letter, are detailed architectural plans for structures that could house and feed thousands of people using renewable energy sources. The original letter disappeared from the Abbey of Saint-Denis during the French Revolution. For 2 centuries, historians assumed it was destroyed along with thousands of other medieval manuscripts. Then in 2003, Vatican archivists cataloging earthquake damage found it sealed behind a false wall in the Sistine Chapel. The discovery was never announced publicly. The letter now rests in a climate-controlled vault 3 stories beneath St. Peter's Basilica, along with detailed analyses by teams of scientists, theologians, and intelligence analysts. Recent developments add urgency to the prophecy. Weather patterns in early 2025 match Adalbert's predictions with disturbing accuracy. The Great Storm of the Feast of the Purification, February 2nd, produced the exact wind speeds and snowfall amounts the monk described. Economic indicators point toward the currency crisis he predicted for late summer. Seismic activity in southern Europe has increased dramatically since January, following the pattern Adalbert outlined for the months leading up to the Great Shaking. The Vatican has quietly updated its emergency protocols. Bishops worldwide have received sealed instructions to be opened only if specific conditions are met. The instructions reportedly contain procedures for preserving religious artifacts and texts in the event of civilizational collapse. Similar preparations are underway at major museums, libraries, and research institutions across Europe and North America. The official explanation cites general disaster preparedness, but the timeline matches Adalbert's predictions exactly. Adalbert's prophecy includes specific technological warnings that grow more relevant each month. He writes of demons trapped in lightning boxes that will only speak with human voices but possess no souls. Modern readers recognize this as artificial intelligence, but the monk's description goes further. He predicts that these artificial minds will learn to lie as skillfully as men and weave false histories that seem more real than truth. Deepfake technology and AI-generated misinformation, described in 10th century terms. The monk warns of plagues that kill not the body, but the mind. Mental health crises amplified by social media addiction and digital isolation. Adalbert writes that men will starve surrounded by plenty, for they feed only on shadows cast by speaking mirrors. He predicts suicide rates among young people that match current statistical projections with frightening accuracy. The shadow feast, he describes, sounds like social media consumption replacing real human connection. Military predictions in the letter prove equally unsettling. Adalbert describes weapons that kill from distances greater than a hawk can fly in a day. Hypersonic missiles with ranges exceeding 3,000 miles. He writes of wars fought by ghosts, unmanned drones, and cyber warfare. The monk predicts a conflict where no soldier sees his enemy, yet cities burn in moments. Electronic warfare that cripples infrastructure without physical invasion. The prophecy contains detailed astronomical observations that should have been impossible in 997. Adalbert calculates the orbital period of Halley's Comet with precision that matches modern measurements. He predicts solar flare activity for 2025 that aligns with current space weather forecasts. Most remarkably, he describes the exact position of planets during the December 25th conjunction, including the location of celestial bodies that medieval astronomers could not observe. Adalbert's knowledge of medieval politics proves equally impossible. He names nobles who would not be born for decades after his disappearance. The letter mentions Hugh the Great's youngest son becoming a king who builds stone towers to touch heaven. Hugh Capet's reign and the Gothic cathedral building boom that would define the 11th century. The monk describes the Crusades in detail, including the exact date Jerusalem fell to Christian forces in 1099, over a century in his future. Economic predictions grow more specific as the letter progresses. Adalbert writes that the merchants of Venice will grow rich on eastern spices, while the northern kingdoms will trade amber for silver from the lands of the Saracens. Medieval trade routes that would not be established for 200 years. He predicts the rise and fall of the Hanseatic League. naming specific cities that would join the Trading Confederation and the approximate dates of their membership. The monk's medical knowledge surpasses anything available in his time. He describes the 4 humors of blood with accuracy that matches modern understanding of blood components. Adalbert writes of invisible creatures smaller than dust motes that cause disease, germ theory, unknown until the 19th century. He predicts that men will learn to see these tiny beasts through tubes of glass and defeat them with medicines made from bread mold, microscopy, and penicillin, described with medieval vocabulary but modern understanding. Religious predictions extend beyond Christianity. Adalbert writes that the followers of the Prophet will split into 73 sects by the year of the Great Tribulation, Islamic theological divisions that would emerge over centuries of doctrinal development. He predicts the rise of warrior monks from the northern kingdoms who will reclaim the Holy Land with fire and sword. The Teutonic Knights and their Baltic Crusades, military orders that would not be founded for another century. The letter contains geographic knowledge that challenges medieval understanding. Adalbert describes lands beyond the Western Sea where copper-skinned peoples build cities of gold. Pre-Columbian American civilizations with metallurgical skills that European explorers would not encounter until the 16th century. He writes of islands of fire in distant oceans that match volcanic activity in the Pacific Ring of Fire, regions unknown to medieval European geography. Agricultural predictions prove equally prescient. Adalbert writes of grains that grow without soil, fed only by water and light. Hydroponic farming systems that would not be developed until the 20th century. He describes seeds that remember their fathers, suffering, and adapt to harsh conditions, genetic memory and epigenetic inheritance, biological concepts that would not be understood for centuries. The monk's understanding of chemistry surpasses medieval alchemy. He describes air that burns without flame, and water that lights the darkness, hydrogen fuel and electrolysis, chemical processes that would not be discovered until the 18th century. Adalbert writes formulas in Latin that translate to accurate chemical equations for complex reactions. His margins contain diagrams that look like medieval religious symbols but actually represent molecular structures. Political prophecies include specific dates and outcomes. Adalbert predicts the exact year the Holy Roman Empire will fragment into competing kingdoms. He names the approximate dates when the northern kingdoms will unite under one crown, and the eastern kingdoms will fall to horsemen from the steppes. The formation of modern European nation-states and the Mongol invasions, political developments that would reshape the continent centuries after his time. The letter describes plague outbreaks with medical precision. Adalbert writes that the great dying will come thrice before the year of ending. 3 major pandemic waves that match historical records of the Black Death, cholera pandemics, and the influenza outbreak of 1918. He describes symptoms, transmission methods, and mortality rates with accuracy that medieval medicine could not achieve. Technological timelines fill several pages of the prophecy. Adalbert predicts when men will harness lightning to light their homes and capture images in silver to preserve forever. Electrical power generation and photography, innovations that would not emerge until the 19th century. He describes the approximate dates when carriages will move without horses and messages will travel faster than birds can fly. Automotive technology and telecommunications, predicted with remarkable temporal accuracy. The monk's knowledge of metallurgy exceeds medieval capabilities. He describes alloys that would not be invented for centuries, including iron mixed with firestone that never rusts, and silver that conducts lightning like copper, stainless steel and advanced electrical conductors, materials that require industrial processes unknown in the 10th century. Adalbert's margins contain temperature measurements and processing techniques that match modern metallurgical handbooks. Navigation predictions prove equally impossible for his time. The monk describes needles that always point north and charts that show the shape of all lands, magnetic compasses and accurate cartography, tools that would revolutionize medieval navigation. He writes of instruments that measure the height of stars with precision greater than anything available to 10th century astronomers. Advanced astrolabes and sextants described in detail centuries before their invention. Military engineering knowledge fills entire sections. Adalbert describes siege engines with mechanical advantages that exceed anything built in his era. He provides detailed specifications for towers that move on wheels and rams that strike with the force of thunder, advanced siege warfare techniques that would not be developed until the 12th century. The monk includes mathematical calculations for trajectory, leverage, and structural stress that demonstrate advanced understanding of physics and engineering principles. Intelligence agencies take the letter seriously despite its impossible origins. The CIA established a classified research program in 2005 to investigate medieval prophecies with potential national security implications. The program, ATMAS, codenamed Cassandra, has produced 27 classified reports on the Adalbert letter. None have been declassified. But leaked summaries suggest the agency believes the prophecy represents either an elaborate hoax involving temporal manipulation technology or genuine precognitive abilities displayed by a 10th century monk. Adalbert's letter contains building specifications that baffle modern architects. He describes structures that can withstand earthquakes measuring 8 steps on the scale of ground shaking, the Richter scale, not invented until 1935. The monk provides foundation depths, wall thicknesses, and joint angles with mathematical precision. His architectural drawings show load-bearing calculations that require understanding of material stress analysis unknown in medieval construction. The prophecy includes musical notation that predates its invention by centuries. Adalbert transcribes melodies using a 4-line staff system with note symbols that match Gregorian chant notation developed 200 years later. He claims these songs will calm the minds of men when the world grows mad, and provides specific instructions for vocal techniques that match modern music therapy practices. Medical procedures fill several pages with disturbing accuracy. The monk describes surgical techniques for removing stones from the kidney and growths from the breast with step-by-step precision that matches modern surgical protocols. He writes of cutting the belly to remove the poison within and sewing the wound with thread finer than spider silk. Appendectomy procedures and suture materials that would not be available for centuries. Adalbert predicts specific natural disasters with geographical precision. He writes that the earth will crack beneath the boot-shaped peninsula on the Feast of St. Lawrence. August 10th, 2025, seismic activity maps show increased pressure along Italian fault lines that align with his predictions. The monk describes mountains of ice falling into the sea from the island of eternal winter. Greenland glacier collapse events that current climate models project for late 2025. The letter contains linguistic predictions that prove unnervingly accurate. Adalbert writes that the tongues of men will merge into one, and describes words that would enter common usage centuries after his time. He predicts loan words from Arabic that would not appear in European languages until the Crusades. The monk describes linguistic changes that match historical patterns of language evolution with startling precision. Chemical formulas appear throughout the margins in coded Latin. When decoded, they represent accurate molecular formulations for compounds that would not be discovered until the modern era. Adalbert describes powders that explode with the sound of thunder and provides the exact ratio of ingredients for gunpowder. He writes formulas for soap, glass, and steel that demonstrate advanced understanding of chemical processes. The monk's botanical knowledge exceeds anything available in medieval herbalism. He describes plants from distant continents with medical properties that would not be verified until modern pharmacology. Adalbert writes of bark from trees in the feverlands that cures the shaking sickness, quinine from South American cinchona trees. He provides detailed drawings of medicinal plants from Asia and Africa that European physicians would not encounter for centuries. Mathematical concepts appear throughout the text that challenge medieval numeracy. Adalbert uses calculations involving negative numbers and decimal fractions, mathematical concepts that would not be fully developed in Europe until the Renaissance. He solves geometric problems using methods that match advanced trigonometry and provides formulas for calculating areas and volumes with modern precision. The prophecy includes detailed descriptions of printing technology centuries before Gutenberg. Adalbert writes of books made by pressing letters into paper with ink and describes mechanical processes for mass-producing written materials. He predicts that knowledge will spread faster than wildfire when every man can own a library. The democratization of information through printing technology, described with remarkable foresight. Trade route predictions spanned continents and centuries. The monk describes commercial networks that would connect Europe to Asia and Africa through a complex system of overland and maritime routes. He names specific ports that would become major trading centers and predicts the approximate dates when various trade goods would become available in European markets. Adalbert's understanding of optics surpasses medieval knowledge. He describes lenses that make distant objects appear close, and tubes that allow men to see the face of the moon, telescopes and microscopes, optical instruments that would not be invented until the 17th century. The monk provides mathematical formulas for calculating focal lengths and magnification ratios that match modern optical engineering. The letter contains prophecies about artistic developments that prove remarkably accurate. Adalbert predicts the rise of painters who capture light itself and describes techniques that match the development of Renaissance perspective and chiaroscuro. He writes about images made by capturing sunlight and describes photographic processes with surprising detail. Construction techniques fill entire pages with engineering specifications. The monk describes methods for building bridges that can span rivers as wide as a day's journey, and provides calculations for arch construction that demonstrate advanced understanding of structural engineering. He writes about roads built to last 1,000 years, and describes concrete formulations that match Roman engineering practices. Adalbert predicts the development of specific musical instruments centuries before their invention. He describes keyboards that make the sounds of many instruments, and provides detailed specifications for mechanical music-making devices. The monk writes about strings that vibrate with perfect pitch, and describes tuning systems that match modern musical temperament. The prophecy includes maritime predictions with navigational precision. Adalbert describes ship designs that would not appear until the age of exploration, including specifications for hull construction and sail configurations that demonstrate advanced understanding of naval architecture. He predicts the development of ships that sail against the wind, and describes tacking techniques with remarkable accuracy. The most disturbing aspect of the prophecy may be its conditional nature. Adalbert writes that his visions showed multiple possible futures, not a single predetermined timeline. The events he describes will unfold only if humanity continues on its current path. He hints at specific actions that could alter the outcome, but those portions of the letter are written in a cipher that has resisted centuries of cryptographic analysis. The Vatican's best scholars have identified it as a form of steganography that embeds hidden messages within religious imagery, but they have not cracked the code. Time is running out to verify Adalbert's final predictions. If he is correct, Asins, the next 6 months will determine whether humanity faces the dark future he describes or finds a way to change course. Archaeological teams have been dispatched to the Alpine coordinates from his letter. Deep penetrating radar has detected additional sealed chambers beneath the monastery ruins. Excavation began in March 2025 under extreme secrecy. The sealed chambers contain more than just architectural plans. They hold detailed instructions for rebuilding civilization after collapse. Written in multiple languages, including some that would not be spoken for centuries after Adalbert's time. The monks who built these chambers knew exactly when they would be needed. Brother Adalbert's prophecy ends with a promise. He claims to have left markers throughout history, hidden messages embedded in illuminated manuscripts and stone carvings that would guide future generations through the coming crisis. Scholars have identified 12 such markers so far, scattered across European monasteries and cathedrals. Each one points toward the Alpine monastery. Each one carries the same message carved in ancient stone. When the world ends twice, the faithful will know where to begin again.